Let's continue our review of supply chain flexibility. We're going to dive into something, especially at the end of this presentation, that really has changed planet Earth and the supply chain. Let's look, first of all, on the impact of changes in the demand volume. You got three different scenarios. You got your baseline, minimal flexibility, make certain you have your demand aspect. Is it really fulfilled? Look at your shortfall, your unit cost, and the average plant utilization. In a perfect world, we use every square inch of our plant. That way, you're maximizing the use of your initial capital investment. If you aren't using the plant, if you got, in this case, like 91% of it used, you got 9% of your original capital unused. Can you find a way to use that? Well, maybe if you added another product, that would sit down. If you have just one product, maybe that other second product can actually pick up that 9%. And maybe you sit down and actually force you to say, whoa, I need to sit down and spend more money to make more money. You have those aspects. So it depends where you're at. So look on your per unit cost. If you look on the different aspects here, in scenario one, your unit cost is 294 per unit cost. That's your baseline. If you have some flexibility, 275, all of a sudden you're kicking up your plant utilization. You can see the same in each one, how when you start adding a little bit of flexibility, your overall baseline cost drops. So is it worthwhile to sit down and have that additional flexibility? It sure looks like it from this sheet, from the perspective I'm looking. Look at scenario three. Average plant utilization, 84%, and boom, you put that little bit of flexibility in there, you're going to have more money, but you're utilizing the entire plant. So you got to figure out all the different things that you're faced with. Is it worthwhile? So analyze what you're doing in the process. This is one of those cases of you need to keep the lesson here for the class because certainly it's an academic class, but in the real world, these numbers mean something. They mean a lot of things. It could mean a bonus for you, depending upon your position, but it also could be a matter of life and death of the company. So look in the aspect of how much flexibility can you have? How can you extract it just with adding one additional product? So it depends. If you have a long chain, it depends how much you respond to the demand volume. So it depends upon your push-pull strategy. It's going to depend also upon how much flexibility you're going to build into the aspect. Compare the two different designs to flexibility. Full flexibility through the creation of the chain, the same number of connections. But what if you broke it down? This example I talked about previously, Pittsburgh and Omaha, they produce 3 and 2, and maybe Modesto, you have 5 because you have the high labor costs. Dayton, Amarillo, depends what you have. You can see Modesto, if you recall, is the most expensive. Then you have Dayton and Amarillo are the least expensive. So between those two cities, okay, Dayton, you just crank out product number one, and you're saving a massive amount of money. It could be your best seller, and maybe product 5 that you're producing over there in Modesto, it's your highest labor cost, but maybe you sit down and just maximize that plant just on that one item. And all of a sudden, while you have that, well, you have Pittsburgh and Omaha producing 2. There's a whole series of different iterations you can work to sit down there and maximize on the 5 plants, 5 products, 8 distribution centers, what is best for transportation costs, production costs, and how many packaging aspects you can have between all 5 different items you're carrying. Here's another look at the changes here as well. You can see plant utilization. If you have flexibility, okay, on scenario 3, it's 100%. Even on scenario 1, with the flexibility, boom, all of a sudden you have 97%. So compare this to the chain versus the not chain as to what you're going to do. The original flexibility strategy creates a long chain and either performs well or dominates it. So it depends. The long chains perform better a lot of times than the short chains. So watch your supply chain overall. The more you go with a long chain, you have more uncertainty than you have with a short chain. A short supply chain, you can sit down and deliver and know exactly what you're delivering. The long supply chain is not always clear as to what you have. A lot of times you really want to use a process called sales and operation planning that really helps you involve on a small degree of flexibility to a large one. It really is a software package, and they're not that expensive, and most places already have them built into their system because it's part of the logistical controls as to what you really have inside. So have regular meetings over here. This is Pepsi, and they really had regular meetings, and I don't know about you, I hate meetings unless they're productive. Here, Pepsi developed a really good meeting on a regular basis. They met on a weekly basis, sometimes more, of the supply chain people, the transportation, finance, sales, and manufacturing, trying to coordinate a meeting. And a company the size of Pepsi, that takes an awful lot of time. So they were really committed to the concept. They reduced raw material supplies from $201 million cost to 195. That's a $6 million savings. That's quite a bit. If you put that in your paycheck, you'd probably be pretty happy for that year. A 2% point decline in growth of transportation miles, even as revenue grew, revenue grows and some of your costs go down. That's always a good thing. And they added 12.3 million cases available to be sold due to reduction in warehouse out of stock levels. Those are big numbers. They did that by having that flexibility. Just in time, or what we call lean manufacturing, really is a spectacular concept. Back in the 70s, Detroit's big three auto manufacturing companies, they had comfort features such as air conditioning. That changes by the mid 80s and it forced a shift to quality. Detroit had mediocre productivity rates per worker, and frankly, the quality was poor. The Japanese, especially Toyota, they came up with a concept called just in time. What they did is they built a central manufacturing plant owned exclusively by Toyota, and they required their major suppliers to build around that central manufacturing plant. So let's say, for instance, the shock absorber company. You have a worker installing shock absorbers and they have a bin sitting next to them. They reach down, they pick up a shock absorber, they put it in the car, bolt it in, reach in, put another one in. And so they're bending over, getting the shock. They get down to the bottom. The worker pushes the button when he has 12 shock absorbers left in his bin. And when he pushes the button, a light flashes across the parking lot and the other one right behind him. And all of a sudden, somebody picks up a high-low. They get a whole new bin of fresh shock absorbers. They drive across the parking lot. Soon as they come into the plant, they have their bin scanned, and all of a sudden, then Toyota owns that bin. And by the way, they're not going to pay for that bin for 30 days. That's pretty standard in any industry. So now they have free shock absorbers for 30 days, and boom, it comes in. And as the worker reaches down, grabs the last shock absorber, the high-low driver comes up, puts the fresh new bins, and the worker continues, doesn't even miss one shock absorber, doesn't take a pause, just grabs the new ones and goes back in. The high-low driver takes the empty bin, takes it back across the parking lot, and Toyota reduces their overall cost because they're not storing the parts inside their plants. Go back to chapter 2 and chapter 3. Nobody wants to have inventory. You want to push inventory off to somebody else. Toyota did that, and they went from being number 6 or 7 on the world production list to number 1, and they continue to do that with high quality by using just in time. But here is the big but. A large part of the crisis we had in the United States during the pandemic was because of just in time. If you have a break in the supply chain, which is what we had across planet Earth because of COVID, so truck drivers couldn't get to their trucks. They were sick. Sometimes the plants themselves, they had to start shutting down shipping areas. All of a sudden, Toyota had 178,000 cars sitting over in Kentucky because of the fact that they couldn't get the chips that go into the cars. A typical car at that time had eight chips in it, 8 computer chips in it, all the way to 140 chips in it. And there could be even more now because the more technology you add, the more computer chips you add to the car as well. They sat there for months waiting for the chips because the just-in-time supply chain broke because of the fact that they were missing truck drivers and other people involved in the transportation. Not just there, and also when you walked into your local store hoping to pick up toilet paper, all of a sudden you're faced with 24 empty feet of shelving space that used to have all the paper supplies, and now none's there. Even though the manufacturing plant still had plenty to ship, they had a glut at the warehouses and in the plant itself because they had a break in the supply chain. Just in time is spectacular and devastating, all in the same breath. So right now you'll see even Toyota, they have warehouses all over the place holding goods just in case. So it's just in time and just in case. So that's how we are now. when you look on the different things at Toyota, I'm going to go back to the original concept, assembly hours per car, 31 hours for GM, 16 hours for Toyota. They sure seem to have their act together. Look at the assembly defects in cars. Toyota, by far, in the 80s, had a much superior car with 130 defects per 100 cars compared to Toyota with 45. That means the average car had no defects on it compared to almost every single car that GM had at least one defect in it. Assembly space per car, how much physical size? 8.1 versus 4.8. Inventory of parts, 2 weeks versus 2 hours. Who had a more efficient and a leaner production aspect of it? It was Toyota, hands down, and they went from being a healthy car company into the world's most powerful car company by using just-in-time and lean manufacturing processes. Brilliant. They eliminated waste. They had employees involved in continuous improvement. They listened to employees. They invested in people and teamwork. They actually had people showing up 15 minutes early all the time and having calisthenic exercises before the shift began. The Americans were lucky to get people showing up on time, let alone early, to do calisthenics. It really was a really interesting comparison of a Japanese methodology of work versus an American. You even have the aspect of Ochi came out with a thing they called really the Z type of workforce, which was a blend of Japanese and American that actually cranked up the level of quality across the United States for overall manufacturing. And we still use Theory Z, we call it, for Ochi for a lot of our technology companies. So mass production decisions are made in Toyota hierarchically from top to bottom. Work in process inventory is always a buffer to help smooth production, and pay attention to the lean paradigm. The decision making is delegated to workers. They actually installed the red button, and the red button is actually highlighted to be a big red button. And if a worker, just an hourly worker, felt that the cars coming down had a continually recurring problem, that worker was empowered to go turn off the button. They would punch the button. The entire line would stop. They would stop cranking out cars, and all those hours sitting there, the hundreds of workers on that line would stop because one worker felt the quality wasn't good enough. And all of a sudden, you had ownership that I have power as an employee. It changed how they did business and elevated them from really a okay company into the top company to sell cars, and the quality was astronomically high compared to everybody else in the market. You cannot ignore data on the use of just-in-time or lean manufacturing, one of the most powerful tools, but even the most powerful tools can fail sometimes, especially damaging the supply chain, as we saw with COVID. And now we have a modified just-in-time aspect of it. But regardless, just-in-time is a good tool to always utilize whenever you possibly can. Take care.